All right, welcome back. We are continuing the conversation with licensed clinical social worker and entrepreneur author Charles Frazer. His recent book entitled Crossing the Line addresses domestic abuse and focusing on the offender, not the victim, mostly men, and most who have dealt with trauma and violence in their past. So we're talking about the reality. A lot of these guys need help, and it's mostly guys, because there are some women who offend abuse too, but they need help. They may see bad examples. They've grown up in a cycle of resolving conflict with violence, particularly with women violence and whatever. It's okay. You work now to break that down. And I want to get into some of the ways, some of the steps. You have a book out on this. You have some of the 5 steps on how to heal the offender, or how the offender can heal. Let's talk about step 1. You talk about self-exploration, understanding that your choices and that you made now and in the past have consequences. Explain that.
Sure. So oftentimes when the men come to me for treatment, they don't realize that their behaviors is causing harm to their family system, right? Because this is what they've done all their lives, or this is what they've been exposed to, or society says it's okay, you know, to be to be the one in control. And sometimes they view domestic violence as just as a physical act, all right? But we know domestic violence, the spectrum is very wide. It can be non-physical. It can be coercive control.
Right.
It could be verbal. It could be emotional, right? And so them really understanding that self-exploration says, what am I doing?
Right, something's wrong. You're doing something wrong, right?
And how is my behavior really, you know, impacting others around me? Because oftentimes these men say to me, I love my children, and I will do anything for my children.
And most times love the wife or spouse or a person that they're beating up, right?
Exactly. And but then I say to them, well, if you love your children, then give them an environment that is safe, that is secure, that is stable. That's the way you could demonstrate your love to them.
Step 2, we talk about self-exploration, self-awareness, accepting responsibility.
Yes. So part of the journey that these men go through is once they realize, oh boy, my behavior falls into that spectrum of domestic violence, is to really begin to understand, well, how did I get here? All right. Oftentimes these men have trauma. Things have happened to them that they have suppressed for many years. I had a young man years ago was sexually abused by his neighbor as a kid and never told anyone and suppressed it. And as he went through treatment, he was able to discover, like, oh my God, this happened. And that anger.
The trauma and anger.
So oftentimes, as part of that self-awareness, is really trying to understand, who am I? What's triggering me? What's causing me to react in a way that's causing harm to someone else?
You mentioned sexual abuse. A lot of times you see stories where the sexual abuser, when you pull the layers back, they were sexually abused themselves back in the day, and all they're doing is manifesting what happened to them X amount of years ago.
Correct.
You know? So self-development, understanding, back to your point, understanding triggers and the power of unresolved trauma. So that takes a lot of introspection. When these tips you're giving, you got to really kind of dig deep down into what's going on with yourself and have an honest conversation and look at yourself, because it's not a very pretty picture to figure out what's going on with me, what was my trauma, what triggers me in the future. So how do you get to that point? If someone's watching right now and they want to get some help and they don't want to go to a therapist, but how do they begin? Can they begin a self-exploration without a professional guiding them through it?
I mean, they can. They can. It's always good to be in a safe, stable environment and get feedback from others. But of course, you can start your own self-assessment, really asking yourself the question, you know, what's driving my behavior? All right. Do I feel I have control of my behaviors? You know, if I'm doing it over and over again, you know, what are the consequences of my behavior? But oftentimes people don't have the ability to step back and be introspective, right? Oftentimes I don't see these guys until there's an arrest or you know, the house is so-called on fire, and then they come. So it'd be good if people out in the audience will, you know, think about their behaviors and the consequences of those behaviors. But self-development says a big part, Stan, is what do I need to learn to do things differently?
Right.
All right? Because one of the things that we do in treatment is not just say, let's take the Band-Aid off and let's look at this wound and let's see what's going on here. We talk about how do we develop skills so that way we could heal and we could do things differently. How do I go from using aggressive conversation with my partner to being assertive? How do I take what's inside of me and express it in a way that I'm not causing harm to someone else?
And though you deal with domestic abuse, we know there's conflict among same-sex people. We had an incident in the town in Greater Hartford just recently where 2 men were shot and killed after an altercation inside a upscale restaurant that now spills out into the parking lot, and 2 guys are dead in their 40s. These grown men,
Yes.
you know, who are using shoot-'em-up, bang-bang tactics to resolve a conflict. So I thought about you when I saw that story. I said, wow, think about that. 3 lives going to be destroyed and their families over someone's inability to resolve a beef.
Yes.
Right? At the end of the day, the beef somehow between these 3 guys, and one guy decided to take it out and kill 2 other people.
Yes. And so what happens is, which is interesting, and I call it the violent spectrum, all right? Me and you have a right to be disappointed. We have a right to be upset. And anger is an emotion that we all may experience at some point. However, I don't have a right to take my anger and then move it towards aggression. And that is where the challenge is. That's the line.
That's where the hard work is, right?
That's where the hard work is.
Because your other points
correct.
here now, self-determination, replacing aggression with effective conflict resolution. So for a lot of folks, that is the hard part. Okay, I know what triggers you. I know what behavior I don't want to do. I'm not sure how to substitute behavior when I'm angry. What do I do? Count to 10. What do you advise them when they say, okay, well, when I'm upset, how do I substitute? What do I do to get myself out of that place?
Sure. So I could give you a couple of strategies.
Sure. We have about 30 seconds. We can carry it over to the third segment.
So one would be the end from the beginning strategy. And what I say to the guys, think about the end from the beginning. All right. Think about if I take step A, what does that end look like? But before I take step A, this is all happening in seconds.
Right.
I'm saying to myself, if I yell, scream, punch, throw things, what does that going to look like at the end? Right.
So, for example, the people you met at the restaurant in Greater Hartford, where if you're going to shoot someone, you got to be able to think and process, okay, if I pull this trigger, this person's going to die, I'm going to jail. You got to be able to kind of understand this is not the way to go, but that's got to be done quickly, right?
Correct. And that's exactly what we teach the guys as one of the strategies, the end from the beginning. Think about what the consequences will be before you go and then take an action that can have significant consequences.
So you got to think about it before the actual action, right? If you're prone to strike a woman, you got to sit down and think when you're not in that mode, what happens if I do this again? What's the consequence? Because if you do it in the moment, it could be too late. You need to be able to map that out before so that when you get to that point again, if you do, you've already kind of mapped it out in your mind.
Correct. You have to make a decision from the very beginning that violence will not take place with me anymore.
Right.
And that is that self-determination stage. It says no more.
And that takes day-to-day work. That doesn't happen by happenstance. You got to every day begin to ingrain that in your mindset. Right? All right. And then I think the final part, you had self-sustainability. Back to self-regulating behavior during conflict, basically finding things that you can regulate yourself when you're upset, when you've hit that point of rage. What can you do instead? I want you to hold that thought. We're going to come back and finish up with the issue of rage and what other alternative steps you can take, and also what the next level of work is for you. You have a new book out. You're doing some things on national platforms, so we'll talk more about that, folks. Return with Charles Frazer, licensed clinical social worker. He's working on healing and rehabilitating domestic abuse offenders. When we come back, we'll talk about what else is on his plate. He's doing a lot of fascinating things. Stick around. You're watching Real People with Stan Simpson.